Okay, so here's my next edition of bait axe. So we've worked through a few different things, sweet corn and salt and maggots, and now I'm going on to an old favourite. We're on the banks of the wonderful River Severn here in Shrewsbury, my hometown, my home river. Wonderful place. I've fished it since I was very small, and a bait I've used since I was a kid is luncheon meat. So I'm not diversifying, it's just simply luncheon meat, even in plastic now if you can't take a tin to the fishery. So it's all in your supermarket, anybody can buy it, anybody can prepare it. All I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a few tips that get me the best out of this wonderful bait. So another nice barbel, not the biggest, but very welcome after a difficult morning. We had a bit of rain early on, river's just coming up a touch, but with more that sort of washings off the road, and it never fishes for me like that. But we managed 4 bites and we put 2 on the bank, probably the smallest 2 we've hooked, but hey-ho. It's been great fun fishing with the meat and fishing on the float, all with the glide stuff. Absolutely brilliant, top fun. We'll get her back. There we are, wonderful 7 barbel on the float. All caught on meat. They come in. Okay, so I've cubed up a tin of meat, and if you watch me do it, I'm not that neat. I don't want the cubes all identical shapes. I don't want them all identical sizes. It's just a bit of this, a bit of that, and sometimes I'll even break one in half. And that, as a bait, is as good as you get. There probably isn't a bait in a supermarket, maybe bar sweet corn, that's as good as that, and it will catch you most coarse fish that swim in this country. Carp, barbel, chub, bream, tench, crucians, they all love it. If it's not a predator, it pretty much guarantee it likes meat. So there's just a couple of things though, a couple of basic things that I like to do to make this just work a little harder for you when you're using it in your swim. So the first one I like to do is what I call like a bomb. Like when we were little, used to have sweets that were all powdery on the outside, bombs, and I do exactly that with the meat. So first off, I'm just dicing the meat in a little bit of liquid attractant. I'm using Sonia Bates hemp and alley oil, so it's basically a hemp based oil mixed with a bit of halibut oil. Lovely green, great sort of fishy hempy flavour, and I'm just mixing that around on my meat. Then I'm gonna add my old favourite, which is hemp and alley crush. I love this stuff. There isn't an application fish, and I don't think I use it for. It is, really is. You know, it's the ultimate for me. So all I'm doing is I'm just adding a bit of this lovely powder and then mixing it up again. And what you'll find, you can do it in a bag as well. It's probably easier in a bag. Blow a bit of air in, shake it all up. And I'll do this a couple of days before I fish, so it really has time to impregnate on the meat and get covered. But like a bonbon, like I was saying, all that bit of attraction then is stuck onto the meat. Fish jumping in our swim there, and as that flows down, as we're feeding that into the swim and the water flows over that, it's just washing all those little bits of attraction off. So very simple, a bit of oil and then hemp and alley crush over the top. Okay, my next tip is again basic, but can make a lot of difference. Basically, it's colouring and flavouring your meat. You can do either or a combination of both. I'm a massive fan of this as the weather turns colder and the water temperature drops. I've found that especially red, krill, squid flavoured meat in the winter can really produce me barbel when they just seem a bit lethargic and they don't want to feed. It's dead simple. I'll run through it. All I'm using is a plastic bag. I'm putting a couple of handfuls or a tin of meat, chopped up again as before, in no particular shape, size, just random. Sonia Baked Lava Rocks in red, brilliant colour. You could use food dye from the supermarket. It doesn't matter. You could use boilie dye, but I just find this is made for the job. It's clean. It doesn't leak. It's not liquid. And a couple of days before I go fishing, I just drop a teaspoon of those in, and then some of the haze liquid. That's got me krill and squid. So that's got my favourite flavours. And it's got, yep, it smells ace, and it's got that extra bit of colour. Very, almost like a luminous pinky red, that one. So I've got my colour, my liquid, bit of air in the bag. Shaking that up, getting it all covered. And then the lava rocks, what'll happen is over the next few days, they'll all start to melt and you end up with meat like this that's been impregnated. I've had that going for about 3 days now. That smells and looks enticing, especially to a cold water barbel. Give it a try. Okay, so my next tip, all that I've done before, I've cubed the meat. What I'm doing now is I'm just going to change the shape and size of it and basically show you how I feed it in a different way. So this is what I'm creating, and I'm adding that to my hempen halibut that I used with the oil to dust the meat before. I've just made a ground bait up with that, just so it's nice and makes a firm ground bait. And I'm adding luncheon meat in that shape to that. I feed it through the swim. That acts like a trigger for the swim. I'll feed that through the swim before I start fishing. Put a ball 3 or 4 different spots down through the swim, and all it's doing is it's just putting that flavour all the way through the swim. Any fish in the swim, it's just alerting them that there's food about, that centre food's about. It's giving them a bit of feed, bringing them onto the luncheon meat, but not feeding them too much. The way I do it is quite simply grater, and that is the same grater I use at home, so don't tell my wife. It's really easy to grate. I prefer it done on the coarse setting, and it grates really quick. So it's literally there, you can actually see that. So it's grating out of there, and that is what we're achieving. So it's almost like luncheon meat worms. Ultra light, takes ages to sink, but gives you massive, massive swim coverage. So mix some of that with the ground bait, and you end up with ground bait like that. Loads of strands of lunch meat in. And what I'm doing with those, dropping them throughout the swim, where I'm going to feed the chunks of meat over the top, or using them on a method feeder, or in a cage feeder, it doesn't matter. Those will come out and they're almost like I say, like worms of luncheon meat. Great for feeding the swim, giving the fish a taste of the luncheon meat, but not overfeeding them. That's one of the things I don't like to do, is overfeed them. Sometimes if you're feeding lots and lots of cube of luncheon meat, there isn't many fish in the swim, you can overfeed them a touch. If you do this, or you're just using a feeder, then you can just add little bits, and it's putting that bit of luncheon meat out, flavoured, and it'll, because it's so light and the strands are so long, what they do is they pick up and they wash straight through the swim. So give it a try, grated luncheon meat. It's a real good way of using this fantastic bait. Okay, so I'm just going to run through what the tackle I've been using today, and it's pretty simple really. It's just our Korum glide kit pretty much throughout. I'm using 8-pound Korum glide line, and the good thing about that is it floats. So we're just float fishing really today. It's my favourite way to fish meat. Give it a whirl. It really is just feeding pieces of meat and then running a piece of meat through it. We could have gone through a bit of trundling, or maybe touch ledgering a bit of meat, but there's been no real call for it today. So my favourite method and the best method to fish when the river's low like this is definitely the float. So I've been using one of our Korum 4-gram Avens. Absolute fantastic barbel float, great for fishing with meat, almost strikes the fish itself. I'm using an Olivet in 4-gram. If I was in a swim where it's really pacey and I want to keep the bait down, I might use a small shot down by the hook link, but I don't even really need that in where we've been fishing today. It drops off pretty deep, pretty quick. I'm dropping it down into that deep with the Olivet, taking it down, and then the float's just coming nicely along, and we just keep easing the meat round the bottom, and the float keeps it working at sort of river pace, which is great. End tackle is one of our specimen hooks. On that, I have the meat screw on the back. It's a Korum meat screw, and I've got to say, it is the best way of attaching meat you can get. A lot of people messing about with hair rigs. That's fine when you're sitting on your box in a swim, but when you I mean, at the moment we're okay. We're standing on dry land. We're on the riverbank on a nice gravel beach. But as I was this morning when we started out, I'm standing out in the river. I've got my pouch, so I've got my meat that I can feed in here. So I can keep getting my bits of meat out and feed in the swim as I go. And then that's just trundling it down the same as what I'm going to be with the float. Freebies match me hook bait. And then all I have to do is literally take out a piece of meat, screw, and just wind that, and you can see the piece of meat I'm using is tiny, and that screw just fits on it perfect, sits the hook in ideal. I've got a tiny little piece of silicone tube there just so the hook sits in the position I want. As we ran through before, it's bonbon, so it's got its hempen alley on there. So as it washes down, all those bits of flavour come washing off. It changes the colour slightly, just changes it up to what everybody's using. And that I can cast as hard as I want. I mean, we're fishing the 7. This is a tight swim, but the swim we're in before is a good chuck across the river. And I can do 4 or 5 runs with the same piece of meat on every time. Probably I'm changing the meat more myself, because I'm actually changing the meat when all the bits have washed off it for a fresh bit that's got extra flavour on before it's actually pulled off. So that's how good the meat screws are. Don't need a needle. If I've got a needle in there, invariably at some point I'm going to put my hand in and I'm going to have it down inside my nail, which I've done many times, and it hurts. As you'll be able to see now, I've just run that all the way down and reeled it straight back through the fast water. and the meat's still there. It's washed most of my stuff off, still a bit on. That's okay for another go. Straight back out. I'll probably get 4 or 5 of those to that piece of meat before I'll change that one. Feed it in and then put a new one on. Okay, so we've come on the 7 again to clear up something I didn't do last time, which was trundle a bit of meat. And it's not been easy again, I can say, but we've managed to fish. Once again, not one of the massive fish we'd like, but a real nice example of a 7 barbel. Likes his meat, trundle along the bottom. Okay, so today we've been doing a bit of trundling meat, and I'm just going to talk you through the rig I was using and the equipment. So we got one of our 11-foot all-round rods, 3-spool reel, 10-pound barbel line, and that's simply tied onto a swivel. On the tag end, I put a SSG shot on, and then I moulded a bit of blue tack around there. It can be plasticine, it can be putty. You can just leave the shot in, it doesn't really matter. If it's snaggy on the bottom, fish with a bit of putty around it. Just give it that bounce over the rocks. If it's not snaggy, you can use a split shot. And don't pinch them on tight, so if it gets caught in a snag, your split shot just pulls off. So that's straight onto the swivel, and you want that fixed, you don't want it riding back up the line. I've got about a 2-foot hook link on there. I'll come down to a foot, but I like to try and start about 2 feet. One of our power hooks, and then my favourite little meat screw. And basically that's as simple as it gets. Probably the simplest rig I use for absolutely anything, but one of the most effective. So that, as you've seen in the video we've been doing, allows me to trundle the bait along the bottom. Very, very standard rig, one of the most basic rigs, but a rig that allows me total control of my bait in the place where I want it. So sometimes when they're not picking it up on the float, when they don't want something flowing past too fast, a bait fished like this, trundled down, can be the key to getting yourself a few more bites. And really, the only skill to it is to match the weight of what you've got on your rig to the speed of the flow. So as I said, underneath my blue tack, you can use plasticine. You don't have to use either. It's just a simple SSG, swan shot, pinched on the line. And then if it's real nice, smooth, gravelly bottom, I'll just use that, maybe 2, maybe 3, depending on flow. But if it's got a few choppy rocks in, and I'm starting to get snagged up a bit, the addition of a little bit of blue tack or plasticine, either you can use, rub a bit of mud in there, or you can rub a bit of sandy shale in there if you want to colour it up. It doesn't really matter. They're not scared of it one way or the other. That gives you a little bit of extra weight, but it also gives it a touch of buoyancy, so it tends to bounce it just over the rocks without getting snagged up. So as you've seen me do today, trundle the meat down. It's a method that's caught me absolutely hundreds of fish. So give it a try and see if it works for you. Okay, so that concludes my look at meat and how best to fish it. Today really we concentrated on the float and feeding that meat and trying to get the best out of it. There's been a few more people fishing the water while we've been on, and there hasn't been a great deal of fish caught. We've been a little bit unlucky. We lost 2 reasonably good fish, one probably quite a good fish, but we have managed to land 2, so I'm pretty happy with that. You know, it's been a good morning, it's been a bit of good fun. Fished a couple of different swims, and like I say, we've used meat to float fish and trot through, and all the glide gear. So that's it for this one from the River Severn. From me, if you've ever got any questions, I'm on Instagram at ellisbrazier44. Give us a shout on that. Any questions about anything I do, and I'll be happy to try and give you a bit of a hand if you need one. All right, thanks very much for watching. See you next time.